Yes, that's so inconvenient. Like, I didn't think that's the end of the screen.
Yeah, it's flippin' delayed.
Yeah, that's fine. What is your life about? Title required. Everything about diamonds. Nee. Okay. What I'm going to do is this is going to be an active quickly. Do this. Just going to start. That will output. Okay. Watch this go. Right. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining in. Tonight marks the start of our 1 week of webinars. So we have done this whole procedure before, but a lot of people were asking for us to do it again because they missed out on a few. Instead of doing it over 4 weeks, we've now decided to do it over 4 days, just so it's a bit more continuous and relevant. So what we'll be discussing tonight's topic is diamonds. So it's all about diamonds, how to get the best buy for diamonds, what to look at in a certificate or any of the specifications, and we'll be explaining a bit of each one of those little things to you tonight. So when we go over this, what we'll basically be looking at is the 4 C's of diamonds, and Shaw will be able to explain a bit better what that all entails.
Before we get right into it, is one of the main reasons we also started the webinar is because of the fact that we see so many people being overcharged for what they have, especially when things don't end well and they come to resell or when they want an offer on the items. So please be sure to invite your friends. This will be something which will put you ahead of the rest of the people in terms of knowledge, and also put you in a space where you can make a purchase which will save you literally thousands. To go to the first section, it's the 4 C's of diamonds, namely the cut, the carat weight, the color, and the clarity. Now those are all crucial parts when selecting a diamond.
So before we get to explaining any of that, we'd like to better acquaint you with the names of the parts of a diamond, basically the anatomy of a diamond. Excuse us. So if we look at it from the very top, you'll see here at the bottom, it's the top view, and that is what we refer to as the table, is this little flat piece in the middle here, if we look at the left bottom. Then, if we're starting from the top, on the right, it reads crown, which is basically the top part that are a bit slanted. Then where those all get together, excuse me, that is called the girdle. So that is basically where the crown and the next part, the pavilion, where they meet, that's called the girdle. Sometimes this part is polished, sometimes it is not. It just depends on the cutter. Then the very last bit that we have is the culet. So the culet is the pointy bit. Most diamonds do have a culet, but not all of them do have a culet. And that is basically that when looking at a diamond. So we're going to jump over to the different shapes in diamond. This is also referred to as its cut. So if it is a round cut or emerald cut, it's referring to its shape.
And this has mostly got to do with every person's individual preference. The most popular in recent years has been the round, actually forever. And within the last year and a half, the ovals have really been prevalent. They've been out there as, I would say, the second most popular. Now, if you glance over your screen, you'll see the majority of all the cuts. It's not all the cuts which are available. But now we're going to get into some interesting detail where, if we look at the round cut, and sorry?
No.
Okay, sorry about that. Now, the round cut and the marquee cut, where you compare apples with apples, will be slightly more expensive than what you call the rest of the cuts, meaning the fancy cuts. It will be enclosed in a red box in just a moment, if you look at the screen. Right, so the marquee cut and the round cut is now, well, I would say boxed out in red. Now they are slightly more expensive if you now compare the exact same apples with apples. And the reason for that is you lose a lot more when you cut your rough diamond as compared to your fancy cuts. The retention of your rough is more on your fancy cuts. And that is the main reason why you'll pay more for your round and marquee compared to the other cuts.
Yeah, so as Shaw mentioned, these are a few of the cuts, not all of them. You get various shapes. The most interesting has been a horse head that I've seen. I'm not exactly sure how someone decides to cut a horse head, but there are many more shapes, many more than you can actually name off the top of your head. The next slide that we're going to is the second C, which is carat weight. So carat weight is exactly what it says. It is a weight measurement. So 5 carats equals 1 gram. That gives you a better idea of how sensitive carat weight is. So with that in mind, and looking at a diamond as a 3-dimensional shape, that means a lot of its weight could either be in its diameter or it could be in its depth. So what you see on screen is just a representation of how large a stone could be. Obviously, if you're watching it on your phone or on a flat screen TV, the sizes are going to differ, but it just gives you a bit of perspective to see that a 1 carat isn't necessarily exactly double the size of a 0.5 carat stone. So carat weight is how much diamond there is, not necessarily how much of it you can see from the top, which is also a very important point to look at when buying stone. You might see a diamond as 0.500 on the dot, 0.5 carats. Now a 0.5 carat diamond is more expensive per carat than a 0.4999 carat diamond. It's just because it falls into different brackets. So if a stone is on the fence like that, have a look at its measurements to see if it's not cut too deep to retain its weight. So it might appear the same size as a 0.46 even, but it weighs 0.5 because of its depth. Then again, you can also have a look at the measurements of a stone, which it might measure the size of a 0.54 even, but it weighs less just because it's cut slightly shallow. So those are a few things to keep in mind when looking at a diamond certificate. We'll get to the different laboratories that certify different stones in just a moment.
And the next aspect we'll be looking at now is the color. Now this is something which is visual, so this will be a main reason for someone's choice in color or in the diamond, because it is something which you can pick up with the naked eye. Now if you look to the left of the screen, you will see the letter D. Now that is the whitest diamond that you can get, which is a blue-white diamond. Now a matter of interest is that when you move over to the letter E, half of E is actually still a D before it really becomes an E. And the reason for that is they are extremely close in terms of color. The reason you see the diamonds on the screen tilted upside down, lying on their tables, or on their heads rather, let's put it like that, is how you view the color of a diamond. When you look straight from the side against a white background with under white lighting, that is how you will see the color difference. I must say this image we got from the internet is quite accurate in terms of the color grading. Now you'll see as you move from the color D, this image stops at the color K, but you can go all the way to the letter Z. It becomes warmer. Now when you get to the color spectrum, oh there you can see it now, my apology. So when you get to the color spectrum of KLM, which is indicated as faint, that is where you start to sit on the fence between your white stones and where you just start moving over to stones that have a slight yellow tint. They don't scream yellow at all, it just has a tint. So when you compare it to a whiter stone, you can see a difference. However, when you set a color stone of like a KLM, it will still appear to be white. If you go further to the very light spectrum, onwards to the letter R, those stones are yellow. You can see them, they've got a tint. And then after Z, which we don't have portrayed here, is when you get to your fancy yellows, and they become more expensive again, but never as expensive as your whitest category.
Now the reason for the very yellow stones being slightly more expensive than slightly yellow stones is again just a question of rarity. So a very vivid yellow stone is much more rare than a slightly colored stone. So these deep, intense, vivid colors range from a cognac brown to champagne yellow. This is also used to measure blue and even green stones, which are much more rare just because it's an unusual color for a diamond. The next window that we're going to have a look at is clarity, which is generally a bit more difficult for the public to understand just because it's so out there basically. So clarity refers to the inside of a diamond. Not all diamonds are a perfect crystal structure. In fact, very few are completely perfect on the inside. So if we start at the top left, it's FL, which stands for flawless. Then there is another grading which is IF, which means internally flawless. That means within the stone there is absolutely no inclusion. When we move over to VVS1 and VVS2, we get to very slight inclusions. Inclusions are little marks which could be the crystal structure that changes direction or a piece of carbon that hasn't crystallized yet. So that is microscopic inclusions. Under times 40 magnification, you'll be able to see it. And no one is going to be walking around with times 40 magnification. Then, if we move down to VS1, it stands for very slightly included 1 and 2. Those inclusions just become slightly bigger, still not visible to the naked eye. We can then move over to SI1, 2, and even SI3, although not all laboratories, or laboratories rather, grade up until SI3. So you'll see circled in red are all the inclusions. So if we get a bit larger than SI3 or even SI2, we move over to included 1, 2, and 3. Now this is where inclusions become a bit more visible to the naked eye.
Before we move on to the next slide, is the difference between all the different categories in terms of clarity can either save you quite a few thousand rand or can cost you quite a few thousand rand. In many cases, well, in some cases rather, you'll find I1 diamond, which is inclusion 1 or included 1, where it can appear to be absolutely eye clean, and that is when you're lucky and you have a stone which has a white cloud, or it has a white marking in it, or it has enough inclusions in it to qualify for a lower clarity on paper. However, it's a salt and pepper effect, meaning that the markings in the stone is spread quite wide. And because of the refraction of the light going through the stone or coming through the stone, you don't see that unless you look under times 10. And once you see it under times 10, then it is easier for your naked eye to pick up where it is exactly. But that is something which can really save you a lot of money. Interesting fact on the differences in culture is that the Americans, for instance, they would rather want a bigger stone and not really care about the purity of the stone. Whereas your Japanese folks, your Chinese folks, and your Korean folks, they would rather prefer a smaller stone but increase the purity, that it is really high up there before they take a larger stone which has impurities.
So the next few slides are going to be examples of color and clarity combinations. So these are videos taken under times 40 magnification. So this first one is a 1.16 carat EIF. So it's the second whitest stone that you can get, but the clearest stone that you can get. So this gives you a 360 view of the stone. You'll notice that you cannot see a single inclusion within the stone. Completely clean, because there is nothing about it. All right, the next one we're going to have a look at is an HVS2. So this is a few colors down the spectrum, as well as a few clarities. So if you look carefully, you'll be able to see on the table of the diamond, as well as round about there, you can see slight inclusions. There's a few little marks here in the table, as we mentioned. So that is basically what an inclusion looks like. The stone looks very yellow at the moment. It's not as yellow. It's probably just the presentation which has caused it an unfortunate position. So the next one we're going to have a look at is a color K. And as you'll notice, it's not yellow yet. So it looks even better in person, especially in natural light. This is a VVS2, so again, a very clear stone, very high clarity. So let's have a look at this one's video. You can see a slight yellow tinge to it as it spins around, but again, it's not a yellow stone per se.
Yeah, the next stone is KLM, so it's 2 colors down, which will have the inclusion of SI1. So if you look carefully, you'll see that the markings are quite clear on the table. There's one almost dead center. There's the reflection in the back of the pavilion. But you can see that stone is more yellow than the previous one, which was okay. Now you're starting to move into the yellow spectrum after, well, starting from M after M, going towards the color spectrum of N, O, P, Q, and so forth.
So the next one we're going to look at is much further down the spectrum. It is an S to T, I1. So you'll see it is much more yellow, and the inclusions are also much more prevalent. So you'll see they are much, much larger. This is also a very good I1. It's a very good positioned I1, basically. There's enough inclusions to classify it as an I1, which affects its price, but they are scattered far enough that there's not a big eyesore that distracts from the beauty of the stone. So we're going to have a look at the different laboratories that we trust at Your Diamonds, and those are GIA, DIA, and EGL South Africa specifically. The reasons why we trust them: GIA is just generally a very good laboratory. It has a standard all across the world. They do have a laboratory in Johannesburg, so we do trust them. Their certificates are extensive, lets you know everything that you do need to know about a stone. You can also verify the stone certificate on the internet using its code, which is generally here at the top, the GIA report number. So you can have a look at this on the internet if you have lost your physical copy as well.
Yeah, when you are in the market to purchase diamond, you should feel comfortable with purchasing any diamond which is either GIA. The next slide will show you an example of a DIA stone, which in my opinion is, I think, one of the best laboratories, even better than GIA, contrary to the popular opinion, and that I've seen over the past months with various stones in terms of the strictness of DIA versus GIA, DIA being slightly more strict. The next example is another laboratory, which is EGL South Africa. Now, why Dante mentioned EGL South Africa specifically is that your EGL New York or EGL Bangkok or EGL Tel Aviv does not have a reputation as EGL South Africa. In fact, you wouldn't buy that stone. You would have it recertified before you trust the judgment of the laboratory. So these three laboratories are the top three laboratories which we feel completely safe with, and you know that if it's gone through this process, the chances of it, your diamonds being occupied by unethical means is 0 to none, or little to none.
Yes. The next slide that we're going to have a look at quickly is just salt and pepper diamonds. Now, not many people know about salt and pepper diamonds. It's kind of a new trend that has begun to surface. So salt and pepper diamonds basically got its name because it looks like pepper, salt and pepper strewn across the stone itself. So it's not a standard stone. Each stone looks different. These are cut in stranger ways, just because the beauty of the stone doesn't depend on its refraction. So even if the stone is cut completely flat at the bottom, it has no effect on the beauty of the stone, because the beauty of the stone comes from its inclusions itself. So as you can see here, many different shapes and also many different grades of inclusions. Salt and pepper stones will fall in the I3 range or further down the clarity spectrum. But there's also, if you look at the top left and right bottom, you could refer to those as salt and salt diamonds. It just means that all inclusions are white. There are no black inclusions, which give it a different look.
Now, as we take it a step further, we're going to be looking at black diamonds, and then the floor will be open, and please ask questions, and please let us know if something hasn't been too clear. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, the natural black diamond, you'll see that there's divots or markings on the surface of a black diamond. That is one of the characteristics of a natural black diamond. Whereas if you look at the one on the right, which is a treated diamond, it's a perfect, flush, shiny finish to it. So in layman's terms, it's been fixed with a type of a resin to make it perfect. Unlike the one on the left, which is natural, However, your natural black diamonds are much more expensive than your treated diamonds. Another interesting fact is that your treated diamonds are stronger than your natural black diamonds, simply because they've been treated with a type of resin, if I may use that word.
So the choice basically lies with the buyer to have a look at either natural diamonds to keep the natural feeling of it, or to go with a treated stone which is stronger and also a bit more what we would call clean cut. So there are a few other types of diamonds to have a look at. One last thing that we do want to have a chat about is fluorescence in diamonds. So fluorescence in diamonds are not necessarily a bad thing. This just means it's basically like freckles. Either you have them or you don't. It's not necessarily a flaw. So sometimes fluorescence can make a stone look whiter, and in some cases makes it look a bit more yellow. In some extreme cases, in sunlight it can have a red tinge to it, but in general it's rare to find a stone that is that fluorescent. So if a stone does have fluorescence, again, don't look into the certificate too much. Have a look at the stone and decide if you like the stone or not. Because after all, you won't be walking around with a certificate strapped to your hand. It will be the diamond itself.
And the biggest matter of all is whether you're getting a good buy, whether you get better visual miles for the money that you're willing to spend, compared to just looking plainly at the certificate as mentioned. And there are quite a few people that do that, and they really do themselves in with a few thousand rands because of the print on paper instead of the beauty of the stone itself. I'm going to open the floor up for questions.
You're welcome to ask any questions. We are watching the comments. We'll answer any questions that you have right here. If we do need a bit of resources or a few different visual aids, we'll let this stand over to the next episode, which will be tomorrow at 7 o'clock, so same time, same place. And for the whole week, we will be having webinars. Tomorrow's topic is metals, what different metals we do use in jewelry, the pros and the cons of each metal, which go better with certain designs and such. So that is bound to be an interesting conversation. If you do have any questions up front for that episode, you're welcome to use our emails, which are here on screen. You can send us an email and we'll be able to add that into the episode.
Okay. First of all, Cheryl, thank you for your question. I'll read it out loud in just a moment. Actually, right now. Cheryl asked that can one buy from the labs directly? Now, to answer that in short is you can't buy from the laboratories directly. That if you are acting as a laboratory, you can't sell. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of corruption. You'll manipulate your stones as you please to get the price that you want. So you either sell or you either grade the stones. But if it is leading towards the question of saving money, you can in some cases buy directly from the cutters, as if you know them. Otherwise, come to your diamonds and you pay something very similar to what you can get directly from the cutters.
So just to give a quick analogy, see the laboratories as a judge, basically, where they don't participate in the competition at all. However, they do give standards and also rules and regulations. So the only purpose of a laboratory is to tell you that this stone weighs this much, is this color, and of this clarity. That's all they do. They have, like Charles said, they do not participate in the selling of diamonds. So it doesn't really matter where you buy from. That stone will have a certificate from one of the three laboratories that we mentioned above. And also, if you do want a certain certificate, you can ask for it. For example, if a stone currently has a DIA certificate, you can also have it recertified at GIA. It's not a once-off ID document that you can't replace with something else again. So that is a basically just a way to look at it. I see Andrea Venter, I'm just going to say it in Afrikaans because it sounds a bit weird. Andrea Venter asked, is it better to look at the stone than the certificate? And Charles, can you answer that one for us, please?
Well, I would say if you're buying it for yourself and not for an investment, look at the stone rather than the certificate. If you are planning to spend a lot of money for future valuing the stone, then maybe the certificate will play a role. For instance, going for one of the top colors, DEF, going quite big and staying with an extremely pure stone. Most times you can get those stones at quite tens of thousands below the retail, the wholesale price, which means you score 80,000, 100,000 Rand on certain stones. I'm talking about the big stones now, which puts you in at a head start in the market if you would like to sell it in the long run. But it's not a short-term investment. I would personally, if you had to ask me, I would look at the stone instead of the certificate, because my eyes can't lie to me. I see what I see, and either I see value or I don't.
I would agree with that. And for us being from South Africa, the saying "it is what it is" very much relevant. The stone's beauty won't change because it says so on a certificate. The stone can only be what it is. So our opinion is that have a look at the stone itself. It is, after all, the item that you are buying. The piece of paper is there just to tell you exactly what it is.
Yeah, to just mention one more thing concerning Andrea's question, is that if you look at the certificate and you look at the actual stone, you'll in many cases see that the price difference between stone A and B will be quite a few thousand Rand. However, when you look at it in person, there's no way that you'll be willing to pay 15,000 Rand difference, because you can't even see 1,000 Rand difference. If that's the case, rather go for the cheaper stone and don't spend an additional 15,000 Rand because of a certificate, which appears to be better. That's really the case.
Just for a very practical example, I saw one of my friends. He actually came to pick his ring up on Friday and got engaged this Saturday, so congratulations to him. But when we were deciding on which stone he wanted to go with, he brought it down to two options, and the one stone was 6,000 Rand more than the other stone. So he was having trouble deciding which one he would like to go with. And in the end, the biggest question was, can you see a 6,000 Rand difference between stone A and stone B? And his immediate answer was, no, I can't. So I'll be going with the cheaper option. There was only the certificate, which was 6,000 Rand difference. Visually, there was absolutely nothing that you could see between the two stones. So in that case, he got a better buy just because he asked himself a relevant question. And if there are no more questions, we are just about on time to finish the webinar for this evening. Before we leave, I would like to ask you to please invite your friends for any one of the next few episodes that we have, or even all of them. That would be great. I see Indrina says, thank you very much for the webinar. Thank you very much for joining in. It was fantastic to have all of you here. Again, we will be here tomorrow at 7, same place and same time.
The last thing from my side is, if the poll is running, if it has been helpful, please indicate. It's always good for us to know whether we are getting information across, or relevant information across, to help the public make better buys, really save a lot of money. I think the poll is active at the moment, so if you can let us know, please do so. And really, thanks for your time, the time of the night. Thanks for attending. It's really a pleasure seeing the viewers and the interaction.
All right, and again, we will see you guys tomorrow at 7, same place. Thank you very much for joining, and have a good night.
Bye-bye.